This is not a normal podcast. Look around. We're on an island in the James River in downtown Richmond. Sharps Island, it's called. People camp here, fish here, party here. For over 200 years, Richmonders have built structures on this island. Inevitably, those structures were washed away, but the Richmonders, like myself, keep coming back, keep building, trying to gain a foothold. Why? For us, the water that surrounds Sharps Island isn't a barrier, it's a threshold, a doorway to a magical place. This acre of rock and sand surrounded by the city, yet somehow completely secluded. On this podcast, our guests have to get in the boat and leave the world behind. I hope you'll come with me. Should have seen it yesterday. You couldn't see a single one of these rocks yesterday afternoon.
All right. Are we beaching?
Yeah.
All right, bringing you in.
All right. All right. We did it. First guest to do the driving.
How do you do? Jeff Schapiro. Hello, buddy.
What's happening, sir?
Not much.
Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go this way.
Good morning.
Good morning, Case.
Jeff Shapiro.
Nice to meet you, Case Graham.
How are you? Case and Claire.
Yes.
As in Claire Chenault, for whom the airfield outside of Lake Charles, Louisiana is named.
Okay.
Remember Claire Chenault? He led the Flying Tigers.
This is probably one of two of the lowest tides I've ever seen. Here, let's keep walking. I'll give you the tour. Plus, I got a present for you up at the cabin.
Tell me this. You don't have any we're too far inland for you to have marsh hens.
I have not seen any marsh hens here.
They're better, I guess, in brackish and salt water.
Okay.
They're supposed to be really good eating, Andy.
Are they a game bird?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's basically a Chesapeake Bay, Eastern Shore target of opportunity.
Okay. Well, it is, what is it, September? So it's dove season.
It's October.
Has the first...
That season, actually, we're now a month into that season. I think
the first duck season?
Yeah, they're also, well, no, we're heading into wood duck season.
Right.
But the marsh hens, also known as the rails, that season opens in September.
Okay.
Oh man, look at this.
Welcome.
It was a work in progress the last time I was on.
Okay. It was that was a while, wasn't it? I'm trying to think.
I missed the past two parties because I was up in the presidential.
That's right. Hiking.
And the first time I was here, at least for a party, I think that was the first party. Was it?
Yes. We've done something, like it's grown every year, and so it's felt more and more like a big party.
Yeah, well, this
but
year
you were
was
there.
More Woodstock-like.
It was a lot like Woodstock. This is, every year for Sharps Fest we do we do a new T-shirt.
Man,
what do you think?
That.
Isn't that cool?
That's great.
Different scenes from the island. If it doesn't fit you, let me know. I'll get you.
If it's an extra large, it'll be fine.
Well, if it's not, your wife will enjoy it.
There's always one way to find out, right?
It is not an extra large, but
it's
it does run large.
Okay.
It's a medium, as we call it.
It's medium? That's nice. I like that. Henry Tenser over yet?
I was just talking about Henry Tenser yesterday. He would be a great one. He's our neighbor.
I know.
Yeah. And a former Sharps Island owner, of course.
That's right. Remember, he was the one who, with the city's approval and the oversight of the fire department, burned what was standing to the ground.
One of the greatest pictures, that picture that they ran in the Times-Dispatch at the time of him, have you seen it?
I've seen a bunch of photographs.
Of him, sort of throwing his head back and laughing with, a two-story fire behind him. I mean, it's incredible.
On Wednesdays, occasionally I will join this group of seniors.
Okay.
I guess I would qualify as one now that I'm age 70.
Oh, man.
Who just get together online for an hour. Henry's among them.
Got it. Yeah, I've interviewed him a couple times just to talk about the island and his efforts. I'll show you the pictures. He's got an album of that structure that he and his friends tried to build. So yeah, this is our this is our spot here.
Very good.
What do you think?
I like this. I like this.
Today on Sharp's Island, we're talking to a man who has been covering Virginia politics since any of us really knew what a super PAC was. For, let's say, 12 Virginia governors, is that right? If
12 Virginia, yes.
We'll do the math here, but I bet that's close.
On a baker's dozen.
Almost a baker's dozen of VA. Yeah, you're right. Probably drank more press room coffee than any doctor would recommend.
And there's been a bit of whiskey and beer consumed in the press room.
Right, we'll get to the old days of covering Virginia politics. But Jeff Schapiro, legendary political columnist and a Richmond institution. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Good to see you. Always appreciate
to the podcast.
An invitation to Sharp's Island.
Yeah, so this is not your first time on the island, right? But some things have changed. We did the tour. What do you think?
It's quite posh.
It is getting a little posh.
I'd say it's to borrow a line from Oscar Wilde. It's an address that inspires confidence.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. We just had an event out here yesterday for the Richmonder. They do a speaker series. We had a bunch of Richmonders out here to hear about the sort of future of the James River and the riverfront. So yeah, we're trying to keep things posh, as you would say. All right, first things first. You just retired from the Times-Dispatch, May 1st. Close enough to just. How's the adjustment been? What's life like?
I have been very busy. Let's put it this way, focusing on things that interest and amuse me with comparatively few distractions.
Okay. So are you still waking up with the notepad in your hand, or are you sleeping in and watching Morning Joe on TiVo?
No. I was never a morning television person.
Okay.
It's like eating chocolate for breakfast.
Right.
But I am an unrepentant early riser. And even without deadlines and events to cover,
right,
and press conferences to attend, and people with whom I would hang out, now sort of at some distance, I just enjoy the
So what's early?
Pre-dawn hours.
What's early for you?
I'm up between 5 and 6 most mornings.
Oof, that is early.
Maybe 7 on a Saturday and Sunday.
All right, for those who don't know you, I want to get to, give me the thumbnail history of Jeff Schapiro, paragraph or two. Born in New York, outside of New York City, right?
No, New York City.
You're born in New York City.
Upper East Side of Manhattan, New York Hospital.
Okay.
Spent my earliest days, first 3 years in New York City. We then moved to the suburbs in Bergen County, New Jersey.
Okay.
Just across the George Washington Bridge, Englewood Cliffs,
right,
New Jersey, which sits on the Palisades overlooking
I have
the
a good
Upper
friend
West.
who went to Bergen Catholic. I know Bergen County.
Yeah, and then we returned to New York after 15 years, back to the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
Okay.
And
so you're truly a New Yorker through and through.
Well, I think it's a birthright, but I've spent 40, soon to be 46 years in Richmond, so I've spent most of my life here.
Yeah, so you've been covering Virginia politics since a disco, let's say, right? I mean, is that right?
Let's put it this way. We had just stopped doing the bump when that was a popular disco era dance when I moved to Richmond in 1979.
79, okay. So
October 29th, by the way, 1979, the 50th anniversary of the great crash on Wall Street.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to think my fortunes were improving.
Yeah, I would say so. And the bump was dying, so that's probably a good thing at that time. I love it. What's the biggest change you've seen in politics and how politics works in Richmond?
Well, I can only speak with, relative comfort about this petri dish that is Richmond and Virginia. But when I moved to Richmond in 1979, the population of this state was about 5.5 million.
Okay.
Fast forward 46 years,
right,
population is about 8.6 million. The majority of the people who live in Virginia now are non-natives.
Wow.
Come here, such as
yourself myself
and myself.
Right.
The state is now, its population is 42% minority. That's people of color, 19%. About 11%.
Has that changed
Asian.
A great deal since you moved here? Or
well,
is that...
let's put it this way. The black population of Virginia has been steady at about 19% all those years. The Asian and Hispanic populations were negligible back then.
At that time. Interesting.
And the other thing that I think is important, 2/3 of the people who live in Virginia live in cities and suburbs.
Right.
And to give you an idea how rapidly and how radical that change is, in 1945, when Virginians chose a governor for the first time since the close of the Second World War, 2/3 of the people who lived in Virginia then, basically our parents, if you will, 2/3 of them lived in the countryside.
Wow. Much more agrarian.
Absolutely. And that's after, this cataclysmic event, the Second World War. Virginia had a gigantic role in that effort. Billions of dollars were pumped into the economy. The rough outlines of suburban Virginia really began to emerge as people were setting up house and shop in places like Arlington, Fairfax. But that's now crept down Interstate 95 and swung east down Interstate 64 to the seacoast.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So you started in '79 as a reporter, I'm assuming. When did you become a columnist? When did they give you the pen and say, hey, we want your opinions, not just we want you to cover things?
When I landed in Richmond, I was working for one of the news services, United Press International. And this was a very competitive state between the two large U.S. news services, UPI and the Associated Press. I started covering politics in late 1980, filling in for the UPI state capitol reporter who was on vacation. So December 1980 is
that was a beat reporter.
Got into this racket.
Got it.
And I was with UPI until late 1985, about a month after the '85 gubernatorial election, when Jerry Beliles, a Richmonder by way of Patrick County, was elected governor. At that point, I joined something called Virginia Business. It's a shiny sheet. It was published by the same company that was publishing the Richmond newspapers.
It was, was it a weekly magazine?
No,
monthly?
It was a monthly magazine, a shiny sheet.
I
was covering government and politics, the legal profession for it. And then in 1987, April 13th,
wow, what a memory.
The anniversary of Thomas Jefferson's birth, I joined the Times-Dispatch as the campaigns and elections reporter. That beat included writing a column every other week, fortnightly.
How old were you at that point?
Sunday paper. Well, that was 1985. I was, 1987. I was just approaching my 32nd birthday.
What an opportunity that must have been.
Well, in the 1980s, the newspapers were still robust. They were still numerous. And as sources of political news, closely read, closely followed by the people about whom the newspapers wrote. And I will stipulate that I'm not necessarily objective about this, but of all of those newspapers, the Times-Dispatch was primus inter pares. It was the largest circulating newspaper in Virginia. That's important because the Post in Washington outsold everyone.
Of course.
It was an out-of-state publication.
Entity.
And its circulation was largely limited to the Northern Virginia suburbs.
So you would have written your first column in 1987.
Late 1987, early 1988.
And you just wrote your last one in May. How many did you write?
May 2nd. Well, the column was an evolving creature. In I
guess opinion piece.
2010. The first year of the Bob McDonnell governorship. I went from a combination beat reporter and columnist to a full-time columnist. And I was writing the column 2 days a week. But of course, at this point, the early 2000s, Al Gore has invented the internet. And there are other ways to tell stories and offer observations and notions, I guess somewhat informed, but for the most part, largely visceral, about what was going on in government and politics. And so I started doing a video column, mug to camera. Also did a podcast off and on.
And you've been on local radio.
Well, in 2001, or in September 2001, just ahead of the 9/11 attacks, started this Friday radio gig.
On the local
initially with
NPR,
what is now VPM in Richmond, and for the past 4 years with Radio IQ, which is Roanoke based. But I'm sure you can appreciate that broadcasting being what it is, that these are outlets that really have a statewide presence, not just through signals they've snapped up around the state, but of course their online presence.
I could see in your face as you were talking about sort of the people you covered, the excitement, or the sort of the sense of how fun it must have been. Was the job was to provoke, well, maybe at first, right? I mean, it's probably been a while since you were bewildered by the job, right? I mean, your job was to what? Provoke, incite. I mean, what reaction did you enjoy most? What was the most fun about that in the early days?
As a columnist, and maybe because for so long I was neither fish nor fowl, covering a beat and writing a column. I never felt that the column should be particularly argumentative.
It just wasn't your style.
It wasn't my style because I thought that the column was another, if you will, reporting outlet. It was another way to tell a story. I rarely, and I mean rarely, if ever, wrote in the first person. I think I can count on one hand the number of times I used the word I. One of those columns was my parting column
Which makes sense.
In early May. But I've often felt that context, background, history, nuance, not to be dismissive of events that are unfolding now, but perhaps try to establish some correlation to the events that preceded them. One of the things that I found most troubling in the early decades of the 21st century is this ever shrinking incuriosity, largely as a consequence of impatience, largely as a consequence of this digital realm in which we find ourselves. In politics, it's often said if you're explaining, you're losing. Well, consider explaining at an era in which audiences lose interest after seconds, and that's compounded by the fact that while maybe newspapers are evaporating, the media spectrum generally is expanding.
It feels like exponentially.
But it's also becoming increasingly narrowly sliced. We rarely have any shared information gathering opportunities.
I mean,
anymore.
To think about like the scope of your career, you would have started with a typewriter and you ended with TikTok, right? I mean, have you seen those stats about how many people get their news from TikTok? I mean, it's incredible.
And we're talking about news in these tiny bites.
By
the way, if it's news.
If
it's news.
How do you trust it? And how do we how do we trust anything? How did we, like the sort of sense of who we trusted and why we trusted them? An institution like the Times-Dispatch, that's a columnist for the Times-Dispatch. There was no sort of question.
Well, I dare suggest, Andy, that you're still old enough to remember when there were 3 network newscasts.
Yes.
And growing up in Philadelphia, you may have some memory of the old Bulletin, the evening newspaper.
I don't, actually. Just the Inquirer.
And the Daily News.
And the Daily News, of course.
There was a great, remember, we would spend summers when our son was a tiny lad, we'd go down to Rehoboth. And, that's below the Mason-Dixon line, but I don't need to remind you, it had a very northeastern feel.
Totally.
And among the newspapers I'd scarf up every morning was the Inky.
Nice.
And there was a great news obituary in the Inky one morning. This was, late May, early June. It was this fellow who used to sell at discount men's clothing. And he would do all of his own advertising
commercials
on local TV.
Weren't those the best?
And his catch line was, is your wife telling you she's seen gunshot wounds better dressed than you?
And that was in the obituary.
And that was in the obituary.
That's amazing.
The news obituary.
The news obituary. One of the things I loved getting from your columns was the sort of personal side. Virginia politics, and I like to your point, maybe I don't know anywhere else as well, but it felt personal, right? Like you felt like you could know these people. Did you ever have a politician surprise you, or someone who turned out different than the way? I mean, I think about this, like Doug Wilder felt Shakespearean, right? And Terry McAuliffe could sell snow to an Eskimo. Like all these guys felt like they were so different and had these incredible personalities. Was that the case, or did anyone, who were your favorites and why?
To your initial observation about Virginia politics and its practitioners seeming, maybe you didn't use this word, but I would, approachable.
Yeah.
So many of these figures, they kind of lived, worked, and walked among, the people who elected them, the people they served. There was definitely an intimacy to our politics that is very much under siege in a state that, in the time I've been here, has nearly doubled in size.
Right.
And then add all those other ingredients: suburbanization, a non-native majority, the exponential increase in the media spectrum, that it's increasingly narrowly sliced, that 13% of the people who live in Virginia are foreign-born.
Really? 13?
Yeah, this is why someone like Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, these are just two examples, campaign in multiple tongues, mostly English and Spanish.
Wait, Warner speaks Spanish?
Yeah.
I knew Tim Kaine did.
And then places like in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, the largest locality in Virginia, north of 1.2 million residents.
Right.
Majority non-white.
Right.
The second largest jurisdiction in the state, neighboring Prince William County, majority non-white.
Interesting.
So all of this has made for a far noisier, far more complex, in some respects, far less intimate politics.
Who are some of your favorite characters over the years?
Oh gosh, well,
just like that made it fun to do your job.
There were some real characters for sure, and I don't necessarily reel these characters off in order of importance. But when I started covering politics, before it became, in Virginia, as it is elsewhere in the country, just rigidly tribal.
Right.
That if you were from the city or the suburbs, you were a Democrat. If you were from the countryside, you were a Republican. Republican. There were ample numbers of Democrats representing rural Virginia.
Yeah.
And in many respects, that sort of contributed to this intimacy.
Right.
Because these were areas of the state that in statewide elections, in choosing a governor, or voting for a United States senator, or picking a president, tended to vote Republican.
Right.
But these voters were content sending back to Richmond time and again Democrats, largely because they were friends and neighbors.
That was their guy.
And, among those characters was someone like A.L. Philpott.
Philpott? Okay.
From Henry County, Virginia.
Philpott Reservoir? Is that named after him?
Is there a Philpott?
There is a Philpott Reservoir out there.
There's a little crossroads in Henry County called Philpott, and that was the family seat. He had been a prosecutor in Henry County, trial lawyer. There were lots of the lawyers were in the majority of the legislature.
Henry County is sort of south central Virginia, right?
It's south side Virginia, but it's in the Piedmont. It's just sort of as the gateway to southwest
I was once invited to hunt coyotes in Henry when I was the outdoors columnist. That was the only time I went to Henry County, and I remember the guy telling me that there was no stop signs in Henry County, not even stoplights.
Now that may be.
Maybe that's changed.
Now, of course, pause here for a moment. Full disclosure, Andy Thompson, you were a colleague at the Times-Dispatch.
That's right. That's true.
You were an editor on the sports desk, and you wrote the outdoors column.
Right. So our pictures probably appeared on the same day at some point. At one time.
Occasionally.
Right.
Occasionally. And by the way, one of the things I need to ask you about the outdoors, and we can maybe address this a little later in the conversation, is how difficult it is to get into the outdoors in some respects.
Yeah.
For example,
certainly the hunting side.
Absolutely.
Requires like a mentor.
or someone who owns a lot of property.
Right. Yes.
Though the state, to its credit, is trying to preserve and expand the number of public hunting grounds.
Right. And there's national forest. I mean, there's a lot of national forest. People debate how good that is for hunting.
But to your point, A.L.
Philpott, right.
He, from Bassett, Virginia, actually. That was the style. It was...
That's how you pronounce that?
A.L. Philpott, D. Bassett.
Bassett, okay.
But, which is a town in Henry County. Henry County was the seat of the furniture industry, or one of the seats of the furniture industry, a big industry in Virginia for a long, long time. But to your point, A.L.
Philpott, right.
He, from Bassett, Virginia, actually. That was the style. It was...
That's how you pronounce that?
A.L. Philpott, D. Bassett.
Bassett, okay.
But, which is a town in Henry County. Henry County was the seat of the furniture industry, or one of the seats of the furniture industry, a big industry in Virginia for a long, long time. Speaker Philpott would tell you that one of the reasons he was an unrepentant Democrat, even as his party lurched further and further to the left, was that, the Republican Party, in which he, growing up in Southside Virginia, was the party of Reconstruction.
Okay.
It was the party that intruded on the lifestyles, the culture, the values of
the Virginia
Southerners.
gentlemen.
But of course now there was an element of race in all of that.
Of course.
Too, because it was what was the conservative party that became the Democratic Party.
Right.
That would become the party, of course, of Jim Crow, and had been the party of slavery. But he was an institutionalist.
Right.
And he knew the law well, and he believed deeply in precedent and preserving procedure.
Right.
And he would rule the House of Delegates from a distance.
Really?
You rarely saw him wandering the halls of the General Assembly building or standing in the back of a committee meeting, maybe throwing a signal. People knew what he valued and knew what he would tolerate.
Right.
And knew
what a different era.
How he would handle it as a bill or an idea as it wormed its way through the General Assembly. But I remember it was the early 1980s. Virginia's Constitution had been amended to give the legislature a chance to act on, essentially consider, for purposes of an override, a gubernatorial veto.
Okay.
And mind you, at this time, there was a Republican governor.
Right.
It was John Dalton. He had just vetoed a House of Delegates redistricting plan that locked in what was then a 2-to-1 Democratic majority.
Right.
John Dalton was trying to put pressure on the Democrats to move fully to single-member districts.
Right.
In other words, it was one member representing one district.
Right.
He or she would have to stand on his or her own, maybe in areas that were increasingly Republican. So there were lots of gamesmanship played by Democrats to kind of work around that. Well, the Democrats in the House of Delegates failed to override that veto. And I caught up with the speaker in the elevator.
Philpott.
And my question to the speaker was, Mr. Speaker, is it a humiliation to the Democratic majority in the House of Delegates that it couldn't override the veto of a Republican governor? He looked at me, he had his pipe in his mouth, he wasn't actually puffing on it at the time, and he said, "Schapiro, you must be some kind of an idiot to think it was a humiliation." Well, on reflection, while he wasn't happy with what had happened, for sure, as a Democrat, and wanted to see his party and his interests perpetuated, he also understood that this was an institutional clash between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And he understood that there were other forces at work, not just party pride.
Interesting.
So I found that as nasty as Philpott's bite could be, if he saw that you were quoting him correctly,
fairly,
accurately, fairly,
right.
he was happy to continue the relationship. And Philpott did.
Interesting guy.
By the way, do you notice this is a locust over here?
Right.
Are you talking the one with the beans?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were flowered. They all through the neighborhood. They were flowering like crazy.
So are you talking about those like pink and white flowers?
No,
I think those are mimosa trees.
Mimosa.
We have some of those out here too.
Those are invasive, right?
They are non-native. I don't think they're considered invasive in the sense that they'll just take over, but they are non-native for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
They are, in fact, out on the eastern end of Long Island, where I spent a good deal of time growing up in an early adulthood. My father had a place out there.
Montauk?
Between the Hamptons and Montauk, and his house was in a place called the Springs.
Okay.
The Springs was the place in which Jackson Pollock hung out. That was his studio.
And he worked there, okay.
And there was this massive mimosa on the grounds of his
Pollock's
house / studio,
right.
now a museum.
Oh, that's cool.
They have a relatively short lifespan.
Yeah, right.
It was still going.
Things still going.
Well into the 80s.
Well, yeah, and out here,
actually well into the 90s.
yeah, we'll take, considering how little actual soil there is on this island, I can't judge any tree harshly, no matter where it's from. You know,
Well,
you know what I
but,
mean?
Andy,
I needed to hold the land.
But you're downriver, so God knows what kind of nutrients are in the water, as well as, undesirable.
Only sweet baby Jesus would know the kind of nutrients in this water, Jeff.
I bet there's a lot of nitrogen.
A lot of nitrogen. A lot of phosphorus.
A lot of phosphorus.
A lot of the good stuff. All right, I'm gonna do, let's do Sharp's Island lightning round. You ready?
Roger
This
that.
is quick hits, gut reactions. All right, can't think too long. Favorite governor to cover for drama, not policy.
Oh, Doug Wilder.
Doug Wilder.
A known political thespian.
That's right. Shakespearean in his approach. We're moving. Most underrated Virginia politician.
Underrated politician, or maybe underrated governor?
Governor, let's say.
I'd say Jerry Baliles,
Okay.
probably one of the most consequential governors.
Okay. What about Holton? Would you put him on that list?
Holton would certainly qualify as a pioneering figure, the first Republican elected governor of Virginia in the 20th century. His election augured the start of this long competitive, two-party competitive era in Virginia politics.
Best quote giver.
I'm sure you're going to edit out this long
we
pause.
can take out the pause. I always felt like he was, when I first moved here, I always felt like Jim Gilmore, felt like he should have been in an action movie or something. He kind of had, I liked his style.
I would say that Wilder was probably among the most eminently and frequently
Quotable.
Okay.
Who ducked your calls the most?
Glenn Youngkin. Oh, for
Okay.
sure. But that was all part of, shall we say, I'm sure a good deal of it was personal.
Why?
I think that for the most part, Glenn Youngkin is a political figure who is largely unfamiliar with the role of the press, even as a former corporate CEO.
Right.
He's generally preferred to communicate with his targeted audience through sources of media over which he has absolute control.
Okay. He wants to control the narrative more than governors past.
Yeah, actually, there was a time, it was a year ago, and I'll tell you exactly when it was. April 23, I was at an event, and I was trying to shag a quote from the governor. I followed him around the room, and it was during all of the early maneuvering ahead of the 23 legislative elections on abortion rights, which would ultimately tip control of the House of Delegates back to the Democrats and preserve the Democratic majority in the Senate, as I started asking a question of the governor about all of this, he cut me off and shouted, "You and I are not having a conversation." To which I said, "Now or ever?"
Right.
And I proceeded to ask the question again. He
Right.
cut me off a second time. "You and I are not having a conversation." They proceeded to scold me over the things that I
Something you
hadn't
had
covered.
Or hadn't covered,
He
okay.
must have. I assume he was discomfited by things that I had written. But what I found so delightful about this encounter is that by being as surly, pugnacious, confrontational, and combative, and clearly personal,
Right.
that he essentially teed up the lead for that column.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's easy, right? All right. If the General Assembly, we're still lightning round here. If the General Assembly was a sitcom, what would it be called?
Well, there was a time, I remember, it was highly unproductive, and in many respects, it seemed like Seinfeld, all about nothing. In fact, I remember Tim Kaine at one point, frustrated by the inability of the legislature to advance anything that looked like a reasonable and reasonably responsible transportation finance program, said that this session was about nothing.
Okay. I like it. What about Everybody Loves Larry? Thinking of Larry Sabato. Or the opposite.
Well, what was the name of it? Ran several seasons. Larry David's spin-off.
Arrested Development?
Arrested
that
Development.
One? Yeah.
There were times that it was in later years. It seems very much out of the Larry David cable television show.
Capitol cafeteria or press room vending machine? Where were you getting your lunch? Where were you getting your lunches?
I must admit that for many years, for most years, in fact, I had the good fortune of packing. Prepared by my wife, who is gifted in the kitchen. Not that I wasn't inclined to, the occasional cup of coffee or a toasted bagel from the Capitol cafeteria. By the way, was named, and still is, named Chickens. Named for its long...
It's named Chickens.
Chickens,
right?
As in
Apostrophe
possessive.
S. Right.
Named for its longtime proprietor, Louise Olive, who had a deviated septum, and as a result, definitely sounded like a chicken. And I assume that was the provenance of her nickname. I preferred to address her by Louise, which I have always considered a lovely name.
That is my mom's name, by the way, Louise.
Your mother, the lawyer.
My mother, the former lawyer, retired lawyer. All right, so kind of looking back, looking ahead, do you think Virginia lost any of its political distinctiveness as national politics? Got louder? All the things that made it what it was in the early days of you?
Well, I made this point earlier about sort of the intimacy that seemed to drive the politics, even as it was evolving into this kind of suburban dynamo. But it is now a two-party competitive state. It's prized nationally by both political parties. We're not in the top 10. We're 12, 13, depending on how we're viewed in terms of population per capita income. A wealthy state, a state in which wealth is also abundant, but also, for the most part, people are highly educated. This is one reason why these Trump-initiated, some of it Doge, of course, a good deal of it now associated with the federal government shutdown, the loss of these jobs, the likely loss of more jobs. This has an impact not just on, the state's bottom line, because a lot of these people are government professionals living in places like Northern Virginia. They tend to be highly educated. So the loss is also of intellectual capital. If these people leave the state to find jobs and opportunities elsewhere.
Real quick, it just occurred to me that look at the tide coming in. Is the canoe still good?
Yeah, Casey's keeping it on.
She's got okay. I was like, man, that thing is coming up quick.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What gives you hope about journalism now? Did you feel like it was a good time to get out for you? And I guess that's a two-parter. Did it make sense to retire when you did, the way things are changing?
Well,
and what gives you hope?
My plan had always been to retire at age 70. I retired a little earlier, about 7 months earlier than I had planned. I hoped to leave on December 2nd because it would have been 40 years to the day that I walked into the newspaper.
So why didn't you?
Let's put it this way, the bean counters decided otherwise. But we have a union contract that includes a generous severance feature that's particularly generous by industry standards for senior folks such as myself. So it was an opportunity to sort of get ahead of the curve and be paid simultaneously.
Get out. I guess the getting was still good when you got out.
I'm still.
But what gives you hope about journalism now?
Well, that people remain curious about consuming information, that they're more interested in or they're willing to turn to sources of information, again, reliable, proven sources of information that will challenge their prejudices rather than confirm them. I think that's one of the greatest obstacles we face right now. I have never had a problem with this move to digital in many respects. It's a throwback to those wire service days when we would cover stories on the run as they are covered online now. It was a matter of calling in a story to someone who would take my dictation and then file it to the wire, as opposed to typing something on a phone or a laptop and then filing it to the web. So I am not hopeless, but I am certainly concerned about where people go, to whom they turn, that they may be less inclined to challenge what they're absorbing or attempting to absorb.
If you could whisper a bit of advice to the Jeff Schapiro that moved to Richmond all those years ago.
To have been even more curious about the past.
Interesting.
I was had a phenomenal interest when I got here. But as I kind of immersed myself in the world of government and politics, I learned how much more there is to it.
Interesting.
So much of what we wrestle with today as Virginians have, their origins, not just in the sectional crisis and the Civil War and slavery, but to the colonial era and even before. For example, one of the things that we Virginians pay is this personal property tax. On the shorthand is the car tax. Well, it's always struck me as somewhat nutty that we would pay a tax on something that is always declining in value. Well, that's a throwback to the colonial era when wealth was measured by hard assets. And so why wouldn't
the car taxes?
Why wouldn't we be looking at other means of harvesting fairly the wealth of a state in which there's a lot of it. The people who generate it are highly educated, and yet we don't do so. And that, by the way, that tax on objects
vehicles,
is not just on automobiles and trucks and motorcycles that we use for personal purposes. Tools and machinery are subject to
the trailers.
Taxes.
Like if you trailer a boat, you're paying a tax on that trailer.
And this is a story that occasionally gets some attention. It's an issue that really requires some form of modernization. But we have these structures in place that
Who's got the appetite?
Make that very difficult. One of the obstacles is that a Virginia governor, and this is unique to Virginia and only Virginia now, is restricted to a single non-renewable term.
That's so...
So if a governor knew he or she could stand for a second term,
Right.
recognizing that the electorate had the ultimate veto,
Right.
he or she might have, say, a longer-term agenda.
Right.
Or ambitions on the policy
It makes them a little
in
myopic,
place.
I guess, right? I mean, they have to be.
Well, there are very few opportunities to really accomplish anything.
Right. All right, what's the future hold for you? Are you still involved in politics, covering it? You're retired from the Times-Dispatch. What are you doing?
I still have my side hustle with public radio.
Right.
That's now
IQ, Radio
24
IQ.
years.
Right.
Friday mornings.
Okay.
It can be heard across the state,
Right.
Over the air and online. I do that with Michael Pope, one
We've
of the
got
politics reporters.
Right.
I've also been appointed, this is the University of Virginia's term, a scholar
Okay.
at UVA's Center for Politics.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Led by Larry Sabato.
There he is.
And his deputy, Ken Stroop, whose background is in...
Scholar, Jeff, no pressure.
Well, it is a position, there are a dozen of us. A good number are journalists
Right.
or former journalists.
Right.
A not inconsequential number are former elective officials,
Okay.
Democrats and Republicans.
Okay.
And I have this idea for a book that I'm just kind of getting into
Gestating.
about the nationalization of Virginia's politics.
Oh, cool.
How we,
I would love to read
we've
that.
crawled, at times leapt from this
Right.
highly personal, for the most part bipartisan
Right.
form of politics to this highly impersonal, highly partisan,
Tribal.
terribly tribal
Right.
form of politics.
Tribal with a side of hashtags. All right, so that means you'll still be covering things like the gubernatorial election. I mean, what, a month from now? Has Donald Trump got himself involved in the gubernatorial election?
Well, if you're looking for a reminder or irrefutable evidence
Right.
that our politics have become incredibly nationalized,
Right.
to some degree, look at our gubernatorial elections.
Yeah.
The results of our gubernatorial elections since 1976,
Right.
the presidential election year, have been counter-cyclical.
Okay.
So that the party that wins the presidency,
Right.
again, starting in 1976, that was a Democrat by the name of Jimmy Carter,
Right.
in every gubernatorial election since,
Right.
the other party wins
Every single
the
one?
governorship, except one. 2013, Terry McAuliffe was elected,
After
barely
Obama.
elected, 1 year after Barack Obama was narrowly
Right. Reelected.
reelected.
Right.
And what that says, I think, is that in a state like Virginia, one of two states that hold a gubernatorial election in the year immediately following a presidential
Right.
election, is that, and Virginia can be competitive, as
Right.
we know,
Right.
that this tends to be, certainly is viewed as a bellwether,
Right.
an early measure of national performance in, say, those presidential midterms
Right.
in this year in 2026. Needless to say that in 2016, Donald Trump was elected to the presidency.
Right.
He did not carry Virginia.
Right.
The following year, a Democrat was elected governor
Right.
in a sweep
Northam?
by Ralph Northam, a great outdoorsman,
Right.
by nearly 10 percentage points.
Right.
There is a good deal of hope, certainly among Democrats,
Right.
that Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee for governor, will
Right.
be, shall we say, the beneficiary
Right.
of,
Keep the streak
of
going.
a big anti-Trump.
Is that what the
bump.
polls are showing now?
There seems to be a good deal of overlap between Spanberger voters,
Right.
Democrats, independents, disaffected Republicans, and those who dislike Donald Trump.
So I would imagine if she looks like the odds-on favorite, he makes him less likely to get involved. Is that right?
Well,
but you said he's been involved
let's put it this
with
way.
the Attorney General race.
We had, the president was in Virginia twice in 7 days.
Last week.
Yeah. Well, he was in at Marine Base Quantico, talking to the generals. It was essentially intended as a rally, I suspect.
Right.
And then he was in Norfolk on Sunday at what he described as a rally, at an appearance at the Norfolk Naval Base.
Right.
Over the day, he did not make a reference to the Republican nominee for governor, Winsome Earl Sears, who's had an on-again, off-again, on-again relationship with Trump. I would note that Virginia, and this speaks to its tribal nature, has not produced a split result at the statewide level in 20 years.
Split as in governor, lieutenant governor?
In 2005, Virginians
so they've swept every time?
Elected a Democratic governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, and a Republican attorney general.
Gotcha.
And in every statewide election since,
it's been
the party of the governor swept in the secondary and tertiary offices.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you're on the job, keeping an eye on things. I look forward to the book. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Andy. Good to see you. See you around the neighborhood.
Absolutely. This was fun. What a day.
Oh, yeah. Outstanding.